Hey guys, what's up? I'm Sai Hai, and I'm really excited to share this new deck with you. I actually believe this is the most powerful and resilient version of auras in Historic that I've ever built, and it uses cards from the latest set and 3 new cards that I've never even used before, so I find it really exciting. It keeps surprising me. I'm going to talk about this deck in 3 phases. I'll go over just a general game plan of what this deck's about for just newer players that are unfamiliar. Second phase, I'll talk about every single card choice and why it's in the deck. And then lastly, stick around because I'm going to talk about advanced play and order of operation of what cards you want to lead with and other different nuances against common decks you're going to face in the format right now and how best to play and order your plays against those decks. So definitely stick around. And of course, please like, subscribe, share this video. I absolutely appreciate the extra reach. I don't say it very often anymore because I know it's really annoying to hear YouTubers say that. So again, just please subscribe and like, and if you're already subscribed, greatly appreciate it. So without further ado, let's just get into this deck. Again, before I get into that phase 1, I just want to talk about some basic stats of this deck. You can win with on turn 3 extremely fast. You can hang with the fastest decks in the format that can also win on turn 3. Some of the combo decks, we can win on turn 3 with this deck, no problem. And there's multiple ways to get there. We're not relying on any one single card. The deck is extremely redundant. We've got lots of similar effects that can get us there and win, again, as fast as turn 3. The deck is also extremely resilient. I said it's redundant, but it's also resilient. A lot of times in these aura decks, you can lose stuff and just lose your important creatures and not be able to bounce back. But we have so much redundancy with these cards and extra ways to draw cards that other aura decks do not, which I'll talk about shortly, that we can bounce back from board states that look really bleak and just start a chain reaction and go over the top of our opponent with ease. So it's really powerful, continues to impress me. So let's get into phase 1. Again, this is an auras deck. Basic idea, if you've never heard of this before for newer players, is you're just using cards like Kor Spiritdancer, Light-Paws, and Sythis that draw cards or put more auras into play or get stronger when more auras are put on them to build one massive giant creature and kill our opponent with as fast as possible. That's the general idea. So let's go over individual card choices and some of the differences I have going on in this white-green Selesnya auras deck. I actually think this is better than white-blue or Azorius auras, and I'll explain why. Let's first, I want to show you or cover the more interesting cards rather than just going down the list. I want to talk about the latest additions because a lot of you have followed me for a while and seen that I've dabbled in white-green auras before, but I think it's better than ever now with some new additions of cards. So first off the bat, we got to talk about Kami of Bamboo Groves from Alchemy. This card is really underutilized. It's not used much at all in Historic, and it's kind of just a quiet sleeper in my opinion, and it absolutely has an awesome home in this deck. And the reason is because it is an enchantment creature above anything else. But let's just talk about what it does. It's 1 green, 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. And then it has a channel ability for 3 mana. We can discard it to get 2 forest cards. Go ahead and just ignore that last clause. I've literally never used the channel ability yet to date. The only way I could see myself using that ability is maybe you're up against some Panza or land destruction deck and you need the extra forest. But generally this deck wants plains, not forests, and it's just not something you're using the card for. But what you are using this card for is because it's an enchantment. So it synergizes with a bunch of the other cards in the deck, as we'll quickly see if it's not already obvious, but I'll go over it momentarily. But this ability to put a land card from your hand on the battlefield tapped on turn 1 is huge for auras. And really, frankly, any deck. Getting a turn 1 mana ramping ability is quite powerful. So when you get this guy in turn 1, you're putting into play an extra land. This is huge for auras because a lot of times auras, you're playing a 2 mana casting cost creature on turn 2, and you can't follow up with it to start buffing it immediately, or putting on enchantments that can give you insurance to draw more cards. But this changes all that. This just ramps up your mana, which is huge for auras. It is such a powerful effect that I've not seen in any other aura deck that I've played, and I've been enjoying it so much that I absolutely stress the 4 copies of this. In addition to being the fact that it's an enchantment creature is absolutely relevant, because I'm talking about the other new addition to this deck, that the brand new addition to Magic Arena. Ethereal Armor has not been around on Magic Arena anyways for a very long time, and I feel like Wizards and other aggro decks have really gotten the spotlight, and those decks are amazing, don't get me wrong, but I don't think enough people have explored Ethereal Armor yet or gone back to auras the way I have now, and I am so impressed. This deck was already really powerful, and it is so much more powerful now. Obviously, this is a modern staple in the old hexproof aura decks. This card is strictly better than all the glitters. It's doing the same thing, but for 1 mana and also giving first strike. So you're giving the creature +1/+1 for every enchantment you control. So Kami of Bamboo Groves is also an enchantment creature. So it's buffing the count of all your Ethereal Armor and all the glitters. In addition to that, the fact that it's an enchantment means that with Sythis, Harvest Hand says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain a life and you draw a card. So not only are we getting card draw off all the auras, now these creatures that have great utility are also enchantment creatures. They're drawing us cards. So we're drawing cards from almost everything we play. And Sythis Harvest Hand is also an enchantment creature. So even it triggers on itself if you have a second copy and have nothing else to do, but you just need to fish for another card. You can absolutely play another Sythis and draw a second card. So again, I just want to go over these newer cards real quick before we cover and go into every card in detail. But Kami of Bamboo Groves is insane, and this is one of the main factors, one of the main cards that enables you to have a turn 3 victory. Say, for example, turn 1, you go Kami of Bamboo Groves. So right off the bat, in turn 1, you're going to get 2 lands. In addition to just the ramp, it also helps fix mana problems, such as where maybe you have a turn 1 Branchloft Pathway on green, and you've got a Sunpetal Grove that would otherwise the next turn come into play tapped, but because you're cheating it into play on turn 1, this now means on turn 2 you're at least guaranteed, even if you don't draw another land, you're going to have 2 untapped lands, so you can at least start to play one of your key integral creatures that enables the aura card draws. So this card is just absolutely huge. The ramping and mana fixing, in addition to the synergy of being an enchantment, is incredible. And we talked about Ethereal Armor, just a huge boon to this deck. Absolutely powerful. It's making auras so much better than it used to be. But so consider the turn 3 like this, like turn 3 victory. You play Kami on turn 1. Turn 2, you have 2 lands, or 3 lands once you play your second land because you had one cheated in play. Now you could play Light-Paws Emperor's Voice, which is the most powerful creature in the whole deck. On turn 2, you could already throw 1 enchantment on it, and then it's going to find another enchantment. So on turn 2, you've got a Light-Paws that's being buffed by 2 enchantments. At that point, it's already going to be massive, biggest thing on the battlefield. Now on turn 3, you're going to follow it up with 2 or 3 more enchantments, which are also going to double up because it's going to get to search for more enchantments that you don't have to spend mana on. So on turn 3, you can be hitting with a 20 power plus Light-Paws, and it's absolutely insane. And just you win so quickly and decisively. I've gotten back into top 100 Mythic at the beginning of the season so quickly with this deck because the games are so fast and decisive. Moving on to the third most powerful card in the deck, or newer addition rather, in the change from other decks that I've showed on this channel, Audacity. This is a brand new card from the latest set. Audacity is incredible. One of the reasons why I like white-green auras, as well as Azorius auras, is when you build such a massive creature, oftentimes you need a way to push that damage through and avoid chump blocking. The last thing you want is a 20 power creature getting chump blocked by a 1/1 token or something. So with Azorius auras, that usually means giving it flying, giving the creature flying, or giving the creature the ability that it can't be blocked at all, which is great. But giving it trample is the next best thing from being unblockable, because it doesn't really matter if our opponent's chump blocking at that point, if they're doing something stupid like blocking with an Ornithopter and then trying to sack it, to make a 4/4 construct or whatever. It doesn't matter. You're trampling through all this damage. So Audacity is huge. The fact that it's only 1 green mana as well is huge. It's giving the creature +2/+0 and has trample, and then another incredibly useful clause at the end, which I'll talk about in a second. But usually in historical decks where I've talked about Selesnya auras, I've used things like Rune of Might, which I'm still using here to give the creature trample. But now that we have Audacity, this is just strictly better and so powerful, because you want to have a lot of 1 casting cost auras to really stack and chain them together and get as much potential damage as possible for things like Kor Spiritdancer and Light-Paws. It's great to have 1 CC cards because they just keep doubling up and drawing more cards or searching for more auras. But Audacity is incredible because being that it's 1 CC, we can play any 1 CC card or aura onto Light-Paws, and on demand we can find whatever enchantment we're missing. Whether it's the Audacity, we need to give the creature trample, we can search for that, or we just need to just plain old buff the creature more. We can find the Ethereal Armor right away and get our Light-Paws or whatever creature we're using to be the biggest creature on the battlefield very quickly. Now, the third thing with Audacity, being that it has this last clause that says when Audacity is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. Now, this is awesome because it can help you as kind of an insurance from getting 2-for-1 or worse. Once you actually get this stuck to a creature, even if they exile that creature or destroy it, it doesn't matter what happens to the creature. As long as the Audacity is going to fall off and go to the graveyard, you get to draw another card, and so it just replaces itself. So you can get really aggressive with this thing, and sometimes even play it on a Kamiya Bamboo Groves or one of the other 1 CC creatures in the deck, even when we don't have a draw engine yet, and just start to get aggressive damage in right away, because it's going to replace itself. And that's what I was talking about, the resiliency factor of this deck. There are so many ways to continually draw cards, whether it's with Audacity, the natural way of just casting auras, or then now what I would call a more unnatural way of using creatures to draw cards that are enchantment creatures, and using Sythis to help draw us more cards, which again, this is going to trigger drawing on the auras and the creatures as well. So Audacity is awesome in helping our resiliency of the deck and continuing to draw cards. Obviously, the worst thing that can happen, and if you're playing against a deck like this, you want to try to catch them when they try to cast the aura on the creature and kill the creature, like say, in response to casting Audacity on Light-Paws, and then you truly do get 2-for-1. However, this doesn't happen that often, because if you look at the way that the other 2 important creatures of our holy trinity between Kor Spiritdancer and Light-Paws and Sythis, I call these the holy trinity. These are 3 awesome creatures in the deck. Remember, the other 2, these trigger not when enchantment enters the battlefield, but when you cast the enchantment. So this puts pressure on your opponent to be killing your stuff proactively rather than reactively, if that makes sense. So they want to kill your stuff a lot of times before you have a chance to get the triggered ability to draw the cards. Well, this creates a problem for them, because now they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't type of situation, where you're going to be drawing cards one way or another. And like I said, you can build back. Don't be discouraged like if your creatures are getting killed, because we have such redundancy factor in this deck. All it takes is to stick one of these guys for 1 to 2 turns, and they will spiral out of control so quickly, because they will quickly become first strike, trampling, life linking, huge ass creatures that you can kill your opponent with 1 or 2 attack steps at most. So really powerful, really resilient. Audacity, huge pickup for this deck. It's better than I thought it would be after playing with it. I'm continually impressed by this card, and In addition, the trample and the card draw is awesome, but the +2/+0 is also really relevant, really aggressive for just a 1cc enchantment. So these 3 cards, Kamiya Bamboo Groves, Audacity, and Ethereal Armor, have really thrown this deck over the top for me. So now let's just cover quickly, real quick, I'll just race through every card and why it's in the deck, and then I'll go into some advanced play order of operations, and show you some weird kind of rules things that you might not be aware of with Kamiya Bamboo Groves, some things to look out for, and just give you kind of a general play guide of my experience and how I play this deck. While it does seem straightforward, there still are a lot of decisions and order of when you can play your cards. So I will go thoroughly over what my strategy is and what works for me to just race into top Mythic and hold there. I'm holding in top 100 right now with this deck. So I'll talk about the advanced play strategies and just things to do. So, all right, let's just quickly cover all the cards. Of course, we've got Lurrus, just the best companion in the game, with Alseid of Life's Bounty. This is another integral card to the deck. Enchantment creature notice. So again, this will trigger Sythis. So even if you have Sythis and no other auras, you can cast this guy and draw another card. So you're always drawing cards. But this is a 1/1 lifelinker, so it is a great target for enchantments as well. Especially against like wizards or something. If you are able to stick a few ethereal armors or whatever on this thing, it's going to quickly get out of burn range, and you just win the game. They can't deal with that. Most conventional builds of wizards, anyways. Some decks they might start to improvise if I'm able to popularize. That's really ridiculous thinking, but if this deck becomes more popular, things that unsummon creatures would be a lot better than burn against this deck, because you can't they can't burn this thing out once it gets too big, but they can unsummon it. However, Alseid of Life's Bounty's second ability, the sacrifice clause, is super relevant here too. So we can sacrifice this to give a creature protection from any color. So that gives us an out if they do have unsummon effects. We can give something protection from blue. It's also awesome as an engine with Lurrus. Once we get Lurrus out, having Alseid of Life's Bounty is kind of like an insurance protector of Lurrus to give it protection from any color on demand, so we can keep that engine going. One thing to be aware of, a lot of the removal in the format is white, especially against control. That's something to be wary of. Be careful about giving a creature protection from white. Just be aware that if you have any white enchantments or auras on that creature, they will fall off. Similarly, if you have to give it protection from green, you might lose the audacities and such may fall off. In that case, you would draw cards. So a lot of times you don't want to do that, where you're going to actually kill your own stuff, unless it's, every situation is different. Unless it means winning or losing, and it doesn't matter to lose a few auras, but just something to be aware of. So anyways, Alseid of Life's Bounty is an awesome card. It's a great target for auras itself, being that it already has lifelink built in. So you can really beat up other aggro decks, and they just can't hang with you once you're making huge life swings where you're taking huge chunks of damage from them and gaining tons of life to put you out of lethal range. So this card is absolutely incredible. Moving on, Cartouche of Solidarity, another old school card for this deck. It's just one copy in this deck because I've made room for all these new powerful auras that I believe should be 4-ofs. Like I talked about earlier, the Ethereal Armors and the Audacities, but you'll see a lot of 1-of enchantment auras in this deck, and that is because of the Light-Paws Emperor's Voice. We can only search for enchantments that aren't already in the battlefield, so we've got a lot of 1-ofs, so that we can get maximum value out of Light-Paws and not hit a dead end where we can't actually search for anything anymore. So I believe I've got the right mathematical amount of things in this deck that you can keep rolling without hitting a dead end, and you're going to have more than enough damage. A big enough creature is not going to be a problem. But anyways, Cartouche of Solidarity is just giving the creature +1/+1 first strike, but also has the interesting ability of it creates another 1/1 warrior with vigilance, which is nice just to have an extra creature on the battlefield, and it can become a target for more auras itself. Already talked about Ethereal Armor. Best aura in the deck now. It is best card in the deck, in my opinion, as well. Of course, when you combine it with the synergy of the aura-loving creatures. Moving on, we got one copy of Radiant Grace. This is a little bit of a weird one, but we're giving the creature +1/+0 in Vigilance. We only have 2 ways to give a creature Vigilance in this deck. The other way being Sentinel's Eyes, which was oftentimes a 4-of staple in these old school aura decks, but now I'm arguing only 1 copy is necessary now, especially in these, like I said, these Light-Paws builds where we need to have more 1-of auras so that we can get that critical mass of searching for the auras. But anyways, Radiant Grace, like I said, a little bit of a weird one. It's +1/+0. The creature has Vigilance. This is good just to buff it. Give it another ability, Vigilance, so we can hang back and block as well. The other ability can be relevant, actually, if this aura dies, or I'm sorry, if the creature dies. Radiant Grace, rather than going to the graveyard, it goes back to the battlefield, transformed, and then it becomes Radiant Restraint. And this is an enchant player, and the creature's enchanted player controlled enter the battlefield tapped. Not always super relevant. At the very least, it's another enchantment on your board that's going to add to the count of all of your Ethereal Armors, all that glitters, and so forth. It's going to buff those and increase the count. But moreover, the entering the battlefield tapped clause absolutely can be relevant against something like Wizards or decks that run a lot of haste creatures, or even just other creature decks where their creatures are going to come into play tapped, and I don't even have to worry about a blocker. It's just going to set them back further. So just a nice thing, just another 1-of aura to fill out our search package. Sentinel's Eyes, again, similar thing here, +1/+1 in Vigilance. This has a very good ability, though, of Escape for 1 white. We do have to exile 2 cards from our graveyard to recast it, but that is a sacrifice we're willing to make. Of course, we don't really want to remove stuff from our graveyard when we have a Lurrus where we can potentially get things back. However, being able to recast a Sentinel's Eyes is really powerful because Escape is casting. It's casting the spell. So again, that means it's going to trigger every one of our creatures. It's going to let us continually draw cards. So even if we don't have a card in hand, maybe we've got a Sentinel's Eyes in the graveyard and we can keep our engine going that way. Moving on, we got Valor of the Worthy. Don't underestimate this. This card has allowed me to kill many control decks, which is maybe one of the most difficult matchups for this deck. The Valor of the Worthy is awesome against sweepers. It gives the creature +1/+1. When the creature leaves the battlefield, you get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So again, it doesn't matter if the creature's exiled. No matter what, if the creature's bounced, killed, destroyed, exiled, whatever, this is triggering and you're getting a 1/1 white spirit with flying that can then become another target. So maybe you've probably, against control, you're going to whittle your opponent's life total down. They might sweep everything, and there's nothing you can do about that, but the Valor of the Worthy is going to guarantee that you at least get a 1/1 white spirit back, and you've probably been drawing cards, no doubt, while you've been attaching auras to your things, so you've got a healthy hand size. Now you got this 1/1 white flyer back after a sweeper, and you can just attach up some auras to it and then win the game with the spirit token. So this 1 copy of Valor of the Worthy has done a lot of work for me. It looks kind of unimpressive, but do not underestimate this. Getting that spirit is huge after a sweeper. Moving on, we talked about the Audacity already, talked about the Kamiya Bamboo Groves. This guy's sick. All That Glitters, 4 copies. This is just, again, our 8th copy of Ethereal Armor. Not as good. It's just doing the same effect, but for 2 mana and not giving it first strike. However, I still find it's so powerful in this deck to buff a creature so big, especially with Light-Paws, where no matter what, even if we don't have these cards, these 8 powerful cards, with Light-Paws, we're going to search for them and find them one way or another, and build a massively powerful creature that way. So 4 copies of All That Glitters, 4 copies of Kor Spiritdancer. Obvious, just again, draw engine has the added benefit of when auras are attached to it. Itself gets +2/+2, which is great. Not a legendary creature, which can be relevant in this deck. I'll talk about a little bit about that why later. Light-Paws, most powerful creature in the deck. This thing is like must kill immediately for your opponent. Otherwise, you start attaching just 1 or 2 auras on this thing, and it's going to double up, and it's going to find, things like Ethereal Armor and all that glitters spiral out of control with Light-Paws so much because you don't have to pay for these cards. So you might pay for a Rune of Might, but then it's finding an all that glitters, and then maybe you have an Audacity that then searches for an Ethereal Armor on Light-Paws, and it becomes so big so quickly that your opponent, they just can't deal with this. Again, if these creatures stick for even 1 or 2 turns, they become just superheroes, and you just dominate with them. So Light-Paws is absolutely awesome. Moving on to our runes, the last of our auras coming up here. We got 2 copies of Rune of Sustenance. I think this is really important, just to have a few 2 casting cost auras in the deck. We've got 2 Rune of Sustenance, just giving the creature lifelink, but we also draw a card. Also, in weird niche situations, if you have nothing else to do, these runes can be cast on your own lands. Just if you're out of resources and you have nothing going on, you can do that. Certainly not where you want to be, but if you're desperate and you have to do it, you can cast a rune on a land just to draw a card. But anyways, 2 copies, giving the creatures lifelink is a really powerful effect. And the only thing that has lifelink naturally, again, is the Alseid of Life's Bounty. So against decks where your life total is being pressured, step 1 is build a very big creature. Step 2, get lifelink on it so you can pad your life total and guarantee victory that way. So 2 full copies. Moving on, another Rune of Might. Talked a little bit about this already. Just another way to give the creature trample, which is so important. Most of the time, we're going to rely on Audacity to do that. But having 1 extra copy is just dandy, just fine and dandy. 2 CC, +1/+1 trample also draws us a card. Again, like the Rune of Sustenance, you can cast it on your own land if you absolutely have to. But this is also just another way to find trample if in some strange circumstance you don't have any Audacities, but you have, you're casting a 2 CC thing on Light-Paws, and you need to rely on that backup copy of Rune of Might to get the trample ability on your creature. Finally, Sythis Harvest Hand. Love this card. The lifelink's relevant, the drawing's relevant, and again, I can't stress how huge it is. The fact that this doesn't just draw you cards from auras, because it's any enchantment. So that means it draws, like I already said, it draws cards from itself if you cast a 2nd copy. It draws cards from the Kamis and the Alseid of Life's Bounty, so it's absolutely huge, and the extra life is always welcome. Lastly, to the lands, and then we'll get to more advanced, a little bit advanced play things and nuances and play order. I'll talk about just kind of my strategy of how I play this deck, because it's not always as straightforward as it seems. But I'm running 21 lands, pretty basic, 3 plains, just because we're more heavy on white. We generally want always plains. We've got the pathways, which we normally will cast as white mana rather than green, unless we absolutely have to. But there's not a whole lot to say up with the lands. It's pretty straightforward. We do our 21st land is, or 21st land rather, is Boseiju, who endures, which is great. If we need to just kill an enchantment or artifact at instant speed, we can do so, and oftentimes this will only cost 1 green, because we do have many legendary creatures in the deck in Sythis and Light-Paws, so don't forget about that. Oftentimes this will only cost 1 green to cast, or use the ability rather, because I guess you don't actually cast it, you channel it. But anyways, everyone knows this card is good. I don't really need to go on about it, but it's great in various matchups, especially artifact decks. You can kill their artifacts at instant speed. It's not necessarily the most efficient thing to do to give our opponent land, but it's basically free to run this card. We can surprise our opponent a lot with it. and get a lot of value from it. Okay, so that's the deck and all the things in a nutshell. Blathering on quickly and a little bit scatterbrained. But now let me just talk about, if you're still here, thank you for watching all this way. I'm just going to go over briefly some general play strategies. First of all, one rules thing to be aware of with this Kami of Bamboo Groves. Like I said, most people are unfamiliar with this card. Like 90% of the opponents I play, they have to read the card because they don't know what it does. So they're confused. Most often, they're going to have no idea what you're doing on turn 1 when you play this. They're not really sure what type of deck you are necessarily yet. They can get some clues from Lurrus, but they're kind of in the dark about what's going on when they see this, and they may be a little bit confused. But one thing to be aware of with Kami is that the land you pick to put into play, be careful with Branchloft Pathway, because the ruling is if you choose this, it's going to always come into play as green, which generally you don't really want to do. You want the white Boulderloft Pathway. So just be aware of that. Most of the time, you're going to want to play this, with a different land, and like a Brushland or something, whatever, and put in, a land that would come into play tap anyways, just to help you ramp. But anyways, I just wanted to point that out. Don't get surprised when you try to pick this and you realize, oh crap, the game's not letting me put the white version into play, because it's unfortunate that by rule, when you put this land into play, it'll always be the green Branchloft Pathway. So just be aware of that. Other things to be aware of are play styles. So generally, let's talk about mulliganing. I mulligan. Obviously, if you have a hand that has no creatures, just throw it away. We have to have a creature. Even if it's a Kami of Bamboo Groves, that's a little sketch. If you only have Kami, I'd rather have at least an Alseid as well. But keeping hands, I keep hands even when I don't have one of these draw engine creatures, but I may have an Alseid or a Kami to help boost myself up. And it's inevitable we're going to draw one of these relatively quickly, these important creatures. There's 12 in the deck. Ideally, of course, you want them in your opening hand, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. But basically, if your hand doesn't have any creatures, that's an easy mulligan. If you only have one land or less, obviously, always mulligan those. Otherwise, you can keep a wide variety of hands. Like I said, with this thing can fix your mana too, in that it can enable you to have 2 mana on turn 2 when you otherwise wouldn't if you got stuck with, like I said, a Branchloft and a Sunpetal Grove. Those were instances where if you didn't have this, you would have had to play like the Grove first and sacrifice your turn 1 and then just to be able to have 2 mana on turn 2. But there are situations where you might have an Alseid, and your second land in your hand, if you don't draw a third land, is going to come into play tapped, and you may be presented in your mind with a decision: do I hold? Do I play that tap land first, hold back the Alseid, and try to go for a 2/CC card on turn 2? I would not. I would just play as if you're going to draw a third land, and always try to be as productive as possible. So play this, even if it means not being able to play one of your draw engine creatures on turn 2, because you just want to stay productive and keep casting things. And it's fine to play these things to draw your opponent's fire or burn spells. So one way or another, we got to draw them out of their hand anyways. And eventually, they're going to run out of portable holes or burn spells or whatever, and you're going to stick something. And all it takes is to stick one of these creatures for a couple turns, and again, they will get out of control so quickly. So play as productive as possible, even if it means potentially not being able to play something on turn 2, but being able to play something on turn 1, like an Alseid. Of course, if it's a Kami, that's good. This is what generally we want to play Kami on turn 1 over Alseid. This is the most important and best thing we can do on turn 1. So with that out of the way, let me just talk briefly about how best to play Light-Paws, and then I will wrap up the video and leave it to everyone else for comments and opinions on this deck. What could be better? Other potential enchantments you could run. I've got some other ideas to test, but I've been rolling with this configuration and been dominating, so I like it so far. But lastly, let me just talk about the Light-Paws interactions. Like I said, the card's super powerful by being able to search for enchantments and put them into play without having to spend mana to actually cast them. But what this means is, since you can't put something into play, an aura that is already in play, oftentimes you will have Light-Paws in play, and maybe you have one of the two most powerful enchantments in the deck in Ethereal Armor and Audacity already in your hand, and then maybe you have another of the ancillary enchantments like Cartouche, Sentinel's Eyes, these other one-ofs. What you want to do is play these one-ofs first on the Light-Paws and search for the card that you already have in your hand, like Ethereal Armor. In this way, you get to double up the effect. For example, if I have Light-Paws in play, if I just play Ethereal Armor, I can't go search another Ethereal Armor. So obviously, what you want to do is you have one of these other enchantments. You play Valor of the Worthy or Sentinel's Eyes, whatever the hell it is. You play that, and then you search for the thing you already have. So now I get this on the Light-Paws, finding an Ethereal Armor. Then I cast my natural Ethereal Armor in my hand, and then that can search for something else that maybe you don't have in your hand, like Audacity or another important effect. You want to establish trample as well as just raw power in Ethereal Armor. Another thing to be aware of is don't be afraid to just get aggressive, like I was saying earlier with Audacity. It's okay if you get this on the creature and get some damage and they kill it. You're just going to get your cards back. Also, against like decks where you suspect they have a lot of removal, maybe it's black and they've got a lot of fatal pushes or whatever, things where it doesn't matter how big your creature is, they can kill it outright, not red, so they're not dealing damage to it. Using things like fatal push. If you suspect that, and against black decks, prioritize Audacity. Get this into play on these creatures as fast as possible, and in many cases, I will consider searching for Audacity and prioritizing it before Ethereal Armor, just because it's going to be a war of attrition. So against these black-red decks, they're just going to keep killing your stuff. But that's fine. They can't survive one-for-ones when it's not a one-for-one. When you're getting cards back with Audacity, and you're also you're getting trigger effects to draw the cards. So it doesn't matter if they keep knocking off these creatures, as long as you're drawing some cards off of each exchange. Eventually, like I said, you're gonna stick one of these guys, and then it's just lights out for their opponent. Once they've run dry of removal, it's lights out time and it's party time, and you're putting all these auras on and they're gonna die so quickly. So that's the deck. That's a little bit of some insight into how I play it and some different nuances, like for advanced play and ordering. Maybe one other thing, if I may, another order of operation type of deal. If you suspect your opponent has lots of removal, and you've got these legendary creatures in your hand, maybe I've got two Sythis in my hand or two Light-Paws. Generally speaking, in a vacuum, Light-Paws is the most powerful thing to play, and I would lead on this. However, if you suspect your opponent's got removal, and of course many decks will, in fatal pushes, shocks, portable holes, whatever, these quick cheap removal, you can play the thing that you have redundancy of, especially if it's a legend first. So like I've got two Sythis or multiple Sythis in hand. Just lead with this, because if they're going to kill something, you'd rather they kill your creature that you have redundant copies of already in your hand, especially if it's legendary, in the case of Sythis or Light-Paws, because obviously you can't have more than one of these in play. So that's fine to lead with this, draw out their removal of their hand, And then hopefully once they run dry of removal, you will eventually be able to stick one of these things you have left, or even better yet, stick a Spirit Dancer and just go from there and just keep buffing and drawing cards. So that's just another thing to think about, like the order of what you play. But again, just to sum up, play your spells, be as productive as possible. Don't hold back. Don't even hold back, like trying to line up, oh, I'm not going to play this until I have mana available for Alseid of Life's Bounty, strictly in the early game, because it doesn't always, it's not very valuable to be unproductive and just assume that they have stuff, because sometimes they just don't have the stuff, and you just play assuming they don't, because a lot of times you will be rewarded for when they don't, and they just die, because sometimes they just don't have the removal in their hand, and if they don't, again, it's checkmate. They can't deal with the power of how quickly this deck builds a creature to 20 plus power. It gets absolutely ridiculous. So the matchups have been really good for me. Wizards, the lifelink, getting a huge lifelink creature, they can't hang with that. Even the artifact decks, you're going to get portable hold. They're going to portable hold your guys, but just remember, they only have 4 copies of it. It's difficult to deal with, but you just have to slog through and eventually stick something, and they can't deal with the critical mass of once you get these creatures out and start the engine going and drawing, you will eventually go over the top of them. Because again, they only have 4 copies of portable hull. They could bounce. They've got the blue land. They could bounce your creature. Comes up from time to time, but we got protection from blue for that. So eventually, they're just going to run dry, and you go over the top of them with these cards. So, blah. That's everything in a nutshell. I know I've gone 40 minutes now of just blathering about this. I know a lot of people will just watch the video for 2 minutes and look at this and be like, okay, whatever. But I'm happy to share all these other little nuances, because it really, a bad player just taking this deck and they play 5 games, bad luck, and they lose, they're going to conclude this isn't good. But I guarantee you guys, if you're a good player, or if you listen to what I'm telling you, like the order of play, and you get a lot of sample size of this deck, you're going to go far with this deck. It's just too powerful to ignore. These cards are so powerful that we didn't have before. The deck was already good enough to get to Mythic before we even had Ethereal Armor and Audacity. And now that we have this 2-punch combo, it's just brutal. So absolutely love this deck. Like I said, I think it's one of the best Aura decks I've ever configured. I'm really happy with it. Happy to share it with you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, please like, subscribe, share. I really much appreciate it. And as always, guys, good luck on the ladder, and peace.